I've always been struck by the story of Kesi, a gorilla infant modified to be stark white, destined to be sold to some wealthy collector. It's a chilling thought, the way science can be twisted. But what happened to him proves that love knows no boundaries. It proves that memory is incredibly powerful. And it shows that even a goodbye can be experienced in its purest, most unforgettable form. I remember seeing the security camera footage from that rehabilitation center. It was a beautiful spring morning, the air thick with dancing cherry blossom petals. No technology, no matter how advanced, could ever truly explain the miracle that unfolded. It wasn't just animal behavior. It was something far deeper. The white gorilla, seeing the elderly woman in a wheelchair, unlocked a lock that had been closed for years, with his own hands. The security team, of course, aimed their weapons, but Kesi had only one goal, a goal more valuable than the entire world. How could a gorilla never forget something he learned years ago? How could he act as gently as a child, despite his enormous strength? How could he become so deeply attached to a human? The answer, as I discovered, lies hidden in the story of a bond that even science couldn't fully explain. It's the story of Emma Carter, a woman who dedicated 42 years of her life to working with primates, showing them a compassion that many humans couldn't. But nothing in her life would be as much of a turning point as the night she raided that laboratory. It was 2006, and controversial experiments in genetic engineering were gaining momentum. Emma, working as a researcher for a private animal rights organization, had been watching a laboratory she suspected of unethical practices for months. That night, she finally managed to get inside, and what she saw shook her to her core. In a small cage in the middle of a cold, sterile room lay a gorilla infant with fur as white as snow. All the other gorillas she saw were dark-colored, natural-looking. But this infant was different, defying the laws of nature. When she looked at the files, she learned the truth. This was one of the first genetically modified gorilla infants. Not albino, but the result of deliberate intervention. Scientists had tampered with its genetics, hoping to display it as a rare species, maybe even sell it to wealthy collectors. But right now, that tiny being was living without a mother, without love, existing only as an experimental object. Emma felt something break within her, and at that moment she made a decision. She couldn't leave this infant there. That night, risking her career, her freedom, perhaps even her life, she took Kesi out of there. She named him Kesi, meaning hope in an ancient language, because he was hope for Emma. He was proof that humanity could still do good, that love was stronger than science. The first days weren't easy. Kesi had been traumatized. He cried through the nights, trembled in Emma's arms. But Emma didn't give up. She fed him, warming milk, put him to sleep, singing lullabies for hours, slowly gaining his trust by showing him she was there every time he woke up. As months passed, the bond between them grew stronger. As Kesi grew, his white fur shone even brighter. But he didn't just develop physically. His intelligence, his ability to empathize, and his loving gaze amazed everyone, as if he was now receiving back all the love he had lost in that laboratory cell, multiplied. When he turned 3, Kesi was already too big to climb on Emma's shoulder. But he still came to her side every morning, rested his huge head on her knees, waited for her hands to wander through his fur. This ritual was sacred for Emma, because those moments were a time for a silent conversation they both shared. Emma taught Kesi simple things: how to peel fruit, how to play games, even how to open a simple lock. She had shown him this last skill as a fun activity. A metal lock, small buttons turned in the right sequence. Kesi thought it was a game, but actually it was one of the most important gifts Emma had given him: the ability to understand the idea of freedom. Years passed. When Kesi turned 10, he was already over 200 kilograms. His white fur literally glowed in the sunlight, while his amber eyes carried deep wisdom. Emma could no longer keep him at home. It would be dangerous and wrong. But the solution she found was the best for him. The local rehabilitation centre agreed to accept Kesi. This was a professional facility designed for injured animals in need of protection, with large areas. Kesi would be safe there, cared for by experts, and able to move freely in a large area. The day she took him there, Emma felt something tear inside her. Kesi looked at her. There was an understanding in those big eyes, as if he knew, as if he understood that Emma thought this was best for him. And as she left him, Emma stroked his head one last time, whispered in his ear one last time, "I will always love you, Kesi. You're my son." And Kesi touched Emma's face one last time. Those giant fingers touched hers as if making a promise that he would never forget her. After that day, Emma visited him every week. According to the centre's rules, she couldn't make direct contact, but just watching him from behind the bars was enough. Every time Kesi saw her, he would stand up, place his hands on the bars, and look at her. Such a look that it was as if he was speaking, as if saying, "Mum, you're here. Everything is..." Time was merciless, especially toward Emma. When she reached 65, the most painful prison is one where the mind remains sharp, the feelings deep, yet the body betrays you. That's what happened to Emma. The strength in her legs diminished, her hands trembled, and the diagnosis came: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or motor neuron disease. Merciless and progressive. Within a year, she was confined to a wheelchair. Her speech laboured. Even forming words became a struggle. She understood everything, felt everything, but couldn't fully express anything. Visiting Kesi was no longer possible. Her health wouldn't allow it. Months passed without seeing him, and the absence consumed her. She knew her time was running out, and she wanted to see him one last time. Her sister Sarah understood and made a plan. She contacted the rehabilitation centre and secured special permission. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms danced in the air, she wheeled Emma through the centre. People gave Emma pitying looks, but she didn't notice. Her attention was fixed on something in the distance: Kesi, standing like a white giant in a large outdoor area. Sarah pushed the wheelchair toward the garden. The spring sun warmed Emma's face, and cherry blossoms landed in her hair, but she only wanted to see him, her son, Kesi. They stopped just before the bars. Kesi had his back turned, sitting on a large rock. Emma tried to call him, but only rasping sounds escaped her lips, and tears streamed down her face. To be so close and yet unable to see him was unbearable. Sarah touched her shoulder. "Let me call him," she whispered. But at that moment, as if by a miracle, Kesi turned his head. Perhaps he felt the vibration, or maybe instinct whispered to him. His amber eyes locked onto Emma. All the noise in the world ceased. There was only the woman and the gorilla, mother and son, reunited after years. Kesi slowly stood. His massive body, over 200 kilograms, moved with a strange grace as he walked toward the bars, purpose in every step. He was coming to Emma. He remembered her. Reaching the bars, he stopped, gripping the metal, his head bowed, his eyes still on Emma. He made a sound, deep and human-like, as if in pain, a characteristic sound gorillas make when they're sad. Sarah brought the chair closer, leaving only a meter between Kesi and Emma. The bars were the only obstacle. Emma tried to reach out with her trembling hand, but she lacked the strength. When Kesi understood, he extended his own giant hand through the bars. His fingers touched hers. It was like electricity. 10 years. She hadn't been able to fully touch him for 10 years. Now those giant fingers intertwined with hers. Warm, soft, familiar. Kesi's fingers began to tremble. Was he crying? Could gorillas cry? Emma didn't know, but she knew they both felt the same pain. A word fell from her mouth. Kai. His huge head bowed further, leaning against the bars as if trying to hug Emma. And then something strange happened. Kesi pulled his hand back, turned his head slightly, examined the lock on the edge of the bars, and then he took action. The simple lock mechanism Emma had taught him years ago as a game. 3 buttons, turned in a specific sequence, would open it. I remember reading about one such encounter, a meeting of 2 souls that defied explanation. It was the farewell of a mother and son after years apart, a gorilla named Kesi and a woman named Emma. Sarah, ever watchful, had to tell everyone to just wait. Kesi was right in front of Emma then, a giant shadow covering her. Sunlight broke on his white fur, creating a halo. Slowly, so slowly, he crouched down until his face was almost level with hers. His giant hand reached out, fingers touching Emma's face with a gentleness, a delicacy, as if she were a child. He caressed her cheek, took a cherry blossom petal from her hair, examined it, then gently placed it on the ground. And then he rested his huge head on Emma's knees. Everyone froze. Security teams, visitors, center staff. No one even breathed. What they saw wasn't just animal behavior. Emma raised her trembling hand, put it on Kesi's head, feeling the warm, soft, familiar white fur between her fingers. Tears flowed from her eyes, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was gratitude, thankfulness. While Kesi kept his head on Emma's knees, he made a strange sound, almost a human-like whimpering that gorillas make only in the deepest emotional moments, as if saying, "Mum, you're here. I missed you. I never forgot you." Words fell from Emma's mouth, difficult and choppy, but coming from her heart. "I love you, Kesi." And Kesi, lifting his head slightly, looked at her. There were no tears in those amber eyes, but there was understanding, acceptance, as if he knew she wouldn't be with him much longer. His giant hand reached for the wheelchair armrest, carefully examined the metal edges, then placed his hand on Emma's. Their hands, under the sun, cherry blossoms falling slowly around them, joined together. And at that moment, Emma realized Kesi was being careful not to hit the edge of the wheelchair. Every movement was calculated, controlled, because he knew she was fragile and he wanted to protect her. Minutes passed. No one interfered. The security teams lowered their weapons. This wasn't a threat. It was love. The center's director, Dr. Alan Thompson, stepped forward, watching Emma and Kesi from beneath his glasses. His eyes welled up. He had worked with animals for so many years, but he had never witnessed such a bond. "The most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice trembling. "This is something even science can't explain." Sarah was crying. Other visitors silently shed tears because everyone understood this wasn't just a woman and a gorilla. This was a universal bond, the bond between mother and child, a love that disregarded species differences, that knew no time or distance. Kesi slowly lifted his head, looked at Emma one last time, then brought his hand to her face, wiping the tears from her eyes with his finger. The movement was compassionate, protective, full of love. Emma also wanted to say one last thing, but words weren't enough. No words could fully express what she felt. But Kesi understood. He knew everything Emma wanted to tell him. "You are my son," she said, with her last strength. Kesi rested his huge head on Emma's knees again, and stayed there. There was something both of them knew. This wasn't a goodbye, but a moment of gratitude, of giving thanks for the most beautiful gift life had given them each other. Cherry blossoms continued to fall, pink petals landing on white fur. The sun shone on the wheelchair's metal surface, and at that moment everything was perfect. As the sun rose toward noon, Kesi was still by Emma's side, not wanting to leave. But Dr. Thompson approached with slow steps, a basket of Kesi's favorite fruits in his hand. "Kesi," he said softly, "come on, buddy. Let Emma rest." Kesi lifted his head and looked at the doctor, then turned back to Emma. There was hesitation in his eyes, as if he knew that if he left her, he would never see her again. And perhaps he was right. Emma, gathering her last strength, gently pushed him away with her hand. "Go," she whispered. "Be well." Kesi placed his giant hand on Emma's one last time, held it tightly, as if trying to transfer all the love coming from within him, then slowly stood up, his eyes still on her. He took a few steps back, stopped, turned around, looked at Emma one last time, and in that look was everything: gratitude, love, farewell, and a silent promise that he would never forget her. Dr. Thompson slowly guided Kesi back inside the bars. Kesi wasn't interested in the fruits. He only looked back at Emma. Even as he walked away step by step, his head was turned. His eyes didn't leave her. When the door closed, Kesi stood there, leaned against the bars, and stayed like that for a long time, motionless, silent, just watching Emma. Sarah moved behind the wheelchair. "Should we go?" she asked, her voice still trembling. Emma nodded her head slightly. Yes, it was time to go. I will never forget the story of Emma and Kesi. It's a story that proves love knows no bounds, no language, no species, no barrier. I think about their story often, especially on quiet nights like this, the day Emma had to say goodbye to Kesi at the center. It was a real farewell, and they both knew it. As the chair began to turn, Kesi made a sound, a long, pain-filled call. It was the kind of sound gorillas make only in very special situations, a mother's call or a son's call. As they moved toward the center's exit, people silently made way, still under the influence of that moment. Some were crying. Some were just looking in shock because what they had just seen wasn't normal animal behavior. It felt like a miracle. When they got home, Sarah made tea for Emma, but she couldn't drink it. She felt empty inside, as if a part of her had stayed there with Kesi. That night, Emma lay in her bed, looked at the ceiling, and thought of the night she first saw Kesi, that tiny white infant, and how she had taken him in her arms. She had made a promise. "I will protect you. I will love you." And she had kept her promise. Every day, every moment, she had done what was best for Kesi. Days passed, weeks passed. Sarah brought her news of Kesi, said he was doing well. But there was something Sarah didn't say. Kesi came to the bars every evening at sunset and looked at the last place Emma had stood. 2 months later, one morning when Emma woke up, she was having trouble breathing. The disease had progressed. Sarah called the ambulance, but Emma refused. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She wanted to be at home in peace. That night, as she lay in her bed, she looked out the window. The moon was full, and white light was filtering into the room. At that moment, a strange feeling overcame her, as if Kesi were beside her, as if that giant hand were touching hers again. She closed her eyes and imagined Kesi, his white fur, his amber eyes, his giant but gentle hands. She imagined that last day, that perfect day, when cherry blossoms danced in the air, when the sun illuminated everything. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for letting me love you, Kesi." And that night, Emma fell asleep in peace. The next morning, Sarah couldn't wake her. Emma was gone, but there was a smile on her face, a peaceful, happy expression, as if she had seen a beautiful dream. When Dr. Thompson received the news, he cried. Emma had not only saved an animal's life, she had given him a life, a loving, meaningful life. How would they tell Kesi? How do you tell a gorilla that the person he loved most has died? But Kesi already knew that morning. He hadn't come to the bars as usual. For the first time in days, he didn't break his morning routine. He just sat in the farthest corner of his area, head bowed, motionless, as if mourning. Dr. Thompson made a decision. He asked Sarah for Emma's favorite shawl. And one morning, in the early hours, he left that shawl in Kesi's area. When Kesi saw the shawl, he froze. He approached, smelled it, and at that moment, his giant body trembled. His hands grasped the shawl, brought it to his face, and smelled it for a long, long time. It was Emma's scent, lavender and daisy. Kesi had never forgotten that scent. He gently pressed the shawl to his chest, bowed his head. From that day on, Kesi slept with that shawl every night. In the morning, he would take it with him, protected it as if it were a treasure. It was Kesi's way of maintaining his connection with Emma. Months passed. Kesi slowly returned to normal. He ate, he played, he lived. But every evening at sunset, he would take that shawl with him and come to the bars. He would sit there, wait, and perhaps, in a way, Emma was always there. In every cherry blossom petal, in every ray of sunlight, Emma was in Kesi's heart, just as Kesi was in Emma's heart. A year later, the Rehabilitation Center erected a special monument in Emma's memory made of white marble. It was a small but meaningful monument, with a figure of a woman and a gorilla hand in hand. Underneath was an Indian, Emma Carter, 1964 to 2026. She taught that love knows no language, species, or barrier. On the day of the monument's unveiling, Sarah was there, and Kesi was there too, watching silently from behind the bars. When the ceremony ended, Sarah went to Kesi's side and looked at him. Those amber eyes gave Sarah a sad but grateful look. "You loved my sister very much, didn't you?" said Sarah with tears. Kesi bowed his head slightly, as if confirming. "She loved you very much too," said Sarah. "Know that." And Kesi, at that moment, made a strange sound, soft, sweet, and sad, one of those rare sounds with which gorillas express their deepest feelings. Years passed. Kesi lived a long and happy life. Grey strands had appeared among his white fur, but that sparkle in his eyes never disappeared, and he carried Emma's shawl with him until he died. One autumn morning, Kesi peacefully passed away. Veterinarians said his heart had stopped, but caretakers said something else. He finally went to be with Emma. They buried Kesi right next to Emma's monument and wrote on it, Kesi, 2006 to 2023. He knew what love was, and he never forgot it. That night, the full moon illuminated both graves. Emma and Kesi, mother and son, two souls finally together again. And you could see cherry blossom petals dancing in the wind, even though it wasn't the season, as if Emma and Kesi were somehow still showing their love. I've always been moved by stories of unexpected connections. The idea that seemingly disparate lives can intertwine, leaving a lasting impact. It's something I often see reflected in the old manus I work with. And the story of these two, well, it stayed with me long after I first read it.